vos dar as boas-vindas a esta série de 2 seminários sobre Large Language Models. Hoje temos o prazer de ter 2 convidados bem ilustres. Antes de eu passar a palavra para eles, eu vou fazer uma apresentação breve de porque é que estes seminários estão ocorrendo. Então, se puderes partilhar os slides. Então, estes seminários estão relacionados com uma disciplina sobre Large Language Models para alunos de mestrado e doutorado no programa de pós-graduação em Estatística e Ciência de Dados. Então, o nome da disciplina é Large Language Models, Inferência e Fundações. E, essencialmente, é um curso de 60 horas e tem uma série de objetivos, em que os objetivos é entender como é que esses modelos funcionam, as arquiteturas principais por trás desses modelos, falar um pouco sobre inferência dentro desses modelos, ter a parte prática. Nós, no curso, aqui estão os alunos do curso, estão aqui hoje, porque isto é durante a aula. Então, nós usamos essencialmente Python na disciplina para fazer os exemplos, os exercícios, etc. O curso eu dividi em vários capítulos. Nós inicialmente fizemos uma introdução genérica aos modelos LLM. Depois falámos um pouco sobre a parte mais fundamental de aprendizado estatístico, aprendizado de máquina. Depois falámos um pouco de N-grams, Transformers, que é as redes por trás dos LLMs. Já vimos alguns contextos principais nos LLMs e vamos agora começar na quarta-feira a parte de inferência para modelos LLM. Vamos falar um pouco sobre decoding, prompt engineering, um pouco sobre inferência e também a parte de aplicação. Depois vamos falar um pouco sobre a parte ética, que é algo que não é tão explorado. Nós vamos falar um pouco, eu não tenho a capacidade suficiente para falar muito sobre isso, mas vamos ter um outro convidado mais para o final do semestre, que ele vai falar um pouco sobre ética em LLMs. Depois um pouco bem rápido sobre a parte de infraestrutura e uma parte de aplicação. Então, essencialmente, esse é o curso que nós estamos a apresentar. Este curso faz parte do programa de pós-graduação em Estatística e Ciência de Dados. A primeira turma abriu no ano passado, no meio do ano passado, e é o primeiro programa em Estatística e Ciência de Dados com esse nome no Brasil. Ele foi designado, foi criado, nós tivemos uma comissão para escrever a proposta. Foi um programa que abriu simultaneamente o mestrado e o doutorado. Nós temos um total de 13 professores no programa, 13 professores permanentes e 3 colaboradores. Dos 13 permanentes, nós temos 9 que têm bolsa de produtividade e os 3 colaboradores também têm bolsa de produtividade. Então é uma equipe forte o suficiente, por isso é que nós decidimos abrir mestrado, ou concorrer para abrir mestrado e doutorado simultaneamente. É o primeiro programa de doutorado em Estatística na Bahia, é o segundo no Nordeste, na área de concentração em matemática, na área de Estatística, claro, e o objetivo é essencialmente formar alunos, formar profissionais que tenham uma forte componente metodológica e também uma componente prática que permita trabalhar quer na academia, quer na indústria. Então, esse é o nosso programa. O website está em baixo, naquele link, para quem tiver interesse. Outra coisa que eu quero falar é sobre o SaLLy, o Statistical Learning Laboratory, que é um laboratório que eu coordeno atualmente e que nós fazemos pesquisa em aprendizado estatístico, aprendizado de máquina, inteligência artificial. Nós teremos 7 linhas principais de atuação. Uma delas é a parte de inteligência artificial e deep learning, que é essencialmente onde está esse tudo que é de redes neurais e desse tipo de modelos. Depois temos a parte de big data, temos uma parte de esporte, machine learning, previsão de séries temporais, modelagem espaço-temporal e também a parte genética. Tá? Então essas são as linhas principais. E para o caso de quererem contactar-me, essa é a minha informação, o meu e-mail, o meu website e os links para o laboratório. E agora, sem mais demoras, tem mais um slide. Sem mais demoras, eu tenho o prazer de apresentar David Banks e Weijie. São dois colegas em que o David Banks é amigo de longa data. Já conheço o David há muitos anos. Então vamos agora passar para a parte principal, que são os seminários, e eu vou apresentar cada um deles e depois vou passar a palavra para eles. So the first speaker, good morning, David. Good morning, Weijie. It is always a great pleasure to interact with David. David is one of the best statisticians and best persons that I know. He's really a very good friend and always available to talk and to discuss and to contribute. So it's really a great pleasure for me to have known David for many years. So David is... Thank you. So David is going to talk about text networks. And David, for those of you that are not familiar with David Banks, he obtained a PhD in statistics in '84 from Virginia Tech. He won a NSF postdoctoral research fellowship in the mathematical sciences, which he took at Berkeley. In '86, he was a visiting assistant lecturer at University of Cambridge before joining the Carnegie Mellon University in 1987. He joined the Department of Statistical Science at Duke University in 2003. He's still there. And he was editor of the Journal of the American Statistical Association and co-founded the Statistics and Public Policy Journal. He was the director of Statistical and Applied Mathematical Science Institute from 2018 to 2021. He's a fellow of the American Statistical Association, the Institute of Mathematical Statistics, and the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences. His research includes human rights data, computational advertising, and adversarial risk analysis. And if you look at ECV, is very long. This is just a very short summary of the positions that he took. He has taken many positions. His contribution for the statistical community is immense. And it is a great pleasure for us to have David today with us. So David, thank you again for accepting our invitation. And please, the floor is yours. You can have around 45 minutes, and then we have a short time for questions as well in the end. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Paulo. Are you able to see my screen? Paulo, are you able to see my screen?
Did you share it already?
I'm trying to share it, yes. Okay. Apparently, you're not seeing my screen.
It's not available for us yet. Can you?
Okay, I've just clicked on share.
Yes.
It gives me a share BlogNet free trial. Let me try adding name. Now that's not working.
No,
okay. Are you able to see my desktop?
It's not here yet. Can you just go to in the StreamYard? You can go down to the share or present.
Okay, let me StreamYard. Okay, resume.
It should be below the cameras, where you see the cameras.
All right, hold on. It was asking me to sign up for free. This is not.
No, you don't have to sign for anything. If you go down back to the StreamYard where you can see the
I'm on StreamYard.
So below the cameras you have probably the sound, the silence, or camera, stop and show camera, settings, and then present. Can you see those in the bottom of the page?
I'm seeing mute, stop cam, settings, present. I've clicked on present.
Present.
Share screen. Okay. And now it takes me, okay. Select a tab to share entire screen. Okay.
I think it's coming. Yes, now you can do full screen.
Okay. So are you able to see my
yes,
slides
now? Now we can see you.
Excellent.
And the full screen.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about community detection and dynamic text networks. And dynamic text networks arrive in many situations far beyond those that arise in national security. For example, if you think about Wikipedia, that is a network of linked documents, and it's dynamic because people will post new Wikipedia articles all the time. It also describes text and voice transmission via email or telephone. You have internet content that is linked by browsing patterns. You can watch the flow of people from one document to another on the internet. And in particular, we're going to be talking about political blogs in this presentation. So those are all examples of dynamic text networks. And you would like to be able to use the information in these dynamic network models to improve topic discovery. You'd like to find out what people are interested in, and so these dynamic text models allow us to do that. We're going to focus on United States political blogs, and we find that there are cliques of blogs that are specialized. There'll be one group of bloggers that care a lot about the Supreme Court in the United States. There's another group of bloggers that care a lot about the President of the United States. There's a third group of bloggers that care a lot about what's happening in, say, North Carolina politics. So all of these things happen. I worked with a company called MaxPoint Interactive, and they and one of my graduate students scraped all the text from the top 1,509 U.S. political blogs. And we identify those blogs according to a website called Technorati. And we scraped all the text between the 1st of January 2012 and the end of that year. And so we're continuing this work a little bit, but I'm going to be focusing on the 2012 blog posts. The influence of a political blog was determined by Technorati based on the site's visibility. And we sanity checked that, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Samples of the text were reviewed by political science majors at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the review found some problems with inconsistent dating of the blog posts and incidents in which the scrape captured not only just the blog text, but also comments that were posted by readers. About 80% of blogs indicate the date of the post in the same way. There's another 10% of blogs that indicate the date in a different way. And then the last 10%, it's all over the map, and there's no telling what type of dating mechanism they used. So it's a little bit difficult to consistently determine what the date of a blog post is. Additionally, many bloggers invite readers to comment on what they have posted. And depending on how they have configured their system, it is possible for the comments, the responses that readers had, to also get scraped with the text when their blog site is scraped. So there are various complications. This is noisy data. There are 114,611 posts on these 1,509 different blog sites, and they generated 324,658 unique tokens, which is an amount of text equivalent to about 50 copies of War and Peace. So there's a lot of text going on here. And the first step in text mining is to remove the stop words. Stop words are words that convey no information, like and, of, and the. And they also want to remove words that have little distinctivity. Because, therefore, interesting, whenever, whatever. None of those words tells you what the topic is about. So we removed all of those. The next step is to tokenize the vocabulary so that words with the same root are combined into the same identifier. And so fight, fights, fought are all essentially the same idea. And so we reduce those to a single token. The third step is to create n-grams, which I heard Paolo mentioning at the beginning of his introduction. N-grams are sets of words that co-occur improbably often. So White House, that co-occurs more frequently than the product of the probability of white times the probability of the word house. And that tells us that the White House is a distinctive idea, a single concept. Trayvon Martin was a an African-American teenager who was killed in 2012. And we'll be talking about him. But again, the words Trayvon and Martin co-occur more often than you'd expect. Finally, a bigram is Supreme Court, because the probability of Supreme Court appearing next to each other is much greater than the product of Supreme, the probability of Supreme times the probability of court. So these are all flags that indicate that these concepts are distinct and they represent words that we want to tokenize as n-grams. We see the same thing with we're going to be using bag of words models. Bag of words models lose semantic information. Using bigrams and trigrams can sort of get back some of the information that's lost when we use a bag of words model. A little bit more generally, BERT and other large language model methods will look at co-occurrence within a window. So you can have President of the United States, President Barack Obama, President Obama, President of the United States, and Barack Obama. Those can all be equated to the same concept. And in 2012, that was the relevant information about the presidency. Negation is a difficult problem for bag of words models because he's not a nice man. The bag of words loses the position of not in that sentence. And so it's hard to understand what the semantic meaning is. Latent semantic indexing is old school. Modern people use word-to-vec. Word-to-vec is a deep neural network, and it places words in a high-dimensional space. And it's a procedure that can address both synonymy and polysemy by interpreting the meanings of the words in the context of other words in the same document. So let me give some examples. Synonyms are an issue for n-grams. The probability for the same meaning gets allocated across multiple sequences. And if you have one person might be talking about reducing the deficit by taxing job creators, and a different person with a different political opinion will want to reduce the national debt by taxing fat cats. Basically, there's both saying the same thing. And the job creators and fat cats should be near together in the term space. They have very similar meanings. So that's synonymy. In some sense, job creators and fat cats are synonyms, and word-to-vec will place them near to each other in term space. Polysemy is harder, and that's going to be when the same word has two totally different meanings. And you need to use other cues in the text to disambiguate those terms. And the term Grateful Dead can refer to a rock band or to a genre of German folk tales. And so if the document that you're reading includes Grateful Dead and also the terms music, drugs, or Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, then probably you're talking about the rock band. However, if the document includes terms like woodcutter, coffin, or a magic goose, then probably you're talking about the German folk tales. So the most popular way to try and do topic modeling is latent Dirichlet allocation. And it was developed by Dave Bly, Ing Jordan, and a few other people. And the generative model for assigning words to documents is as described there. You can read the bullets, but I think I can explain it in different words more easily. A topic is a probability distribution over the words in the dictionary. And so if a topic puts a lot of weight on words like integral, derivative, epsilon, delta, continuous, uniformly continuous, then you've got a topic that we can identify as being mathematics. Another topic might put a lot of weight on words like quasar, black hole, cosmology, Schwarzschild radius. That's a topic that puts a lot of weight on words like astronomy. And so we imagine that we're going to create a document by drawing maybe with 70% probability from astronomy and 30% probability from mathematics. So we'll toss a coin that's unfair, has 70% chance of coming up heads, 30% chance of coming up tails. If it comes up heads, we take a random draw from the distribution over the words in astronomy. If it comes up tails, we take a random draw from the distribution of the words over mathematics. And we toss this coin as many times as there are words in the document. And so we create a bag of words that describes a paper that is 70% astronomy and 30% mathematics. And so that's the generative model for how a paper gets produced. And now we use Markov chain Monte Carlo to reverse engineer that. We feed it a batch of documents, and the Markov chain Monte Carlo algorithm learns that there's a topic that has these probabilities on these words, say high probability on integral, high probability on derivative, high probability on epsilon delta, high probability on uniformly continuous, and low probability on Zeus, Athena, Hera. So it's going to put a lot of weight on math things, virtually no weight on Greek mythology. So Markov chain Monte Carlo reverse engineers this and learns what the distribution over the words are, and it learns what the proportion of each topic is in a document. And this can be visualized as a plate diagram, which encodes the information in the bullet points on the previous slide. So here we're picking a topic, and here we're picking a word from that topic, and that's going to give us the ith word in the document. You don't need to study the plate diagram. I include it only because later on we're going to have a slightly more complicated model, and you can compare this visually to the complication here in the plate diagram, the simple plate diagram. Now, in order to handle topic dynamics, we need a mechanism for change in vocabulary weights, because over time, for a dynamic model, some words or some ideas are going to get upweighted and other words are going to get downweighted. So we're going to allow a model in which the distribution of the vocabulary can change in 4 ways. It may be the weight on a word doesn't change from the first time period to the second time period. It may be that the weight on a word can decrease by about 10%. And in the 2012 US political presidential campaign, Newt Gingrich started out as a presidential candidate, but then the weight on Newt Gingrich dropped over time as he became less and less popular. We'll also allow the weight on a word to increase by 10%. Mitt Romney started out with a low weight, but as the presidential election season persisted, he emerged as the front runner from the Republican campaign. And so more and more attention, more and more weight was put on the bigram Mitt Romney. And finally, we can allow a new word to be added with a large probability. And for 2012, there was the terrorist attack in Benghazi, and Benghazi did not appear as a word anywhere at all before September 11, 2012 in the US political blogs. But after September 11, it had a lot of weight and it was used extensively as people discussed it. So those are 4 mechanisms for dynamic change that we would like to allow. And every word in our vocabulary, in our dictionary, has an independent probability of undergoing one of these changes. And once we reweight things, we have to renormalize. To model the network structure, we suppose that each blog site is assigned to a single block and that there's a Poisson number of blocks. And we're going to use Markov chain Monte Carlo to determine how many blocks there are. Members of a block are interested in the same set of topics, and with one exception, no block is interested in more than 3 topics. So we allow a block to be mostly interested in the Supreme Court, but have a little bit of interest in tax law and a little bit of interest in criminal law. Another block might be interested in the presidential campaign, but also have a little bit of interest in sensational crime and a little bit of interest in international politics. So we're trying to force blocks that focus on specific ideas. The exception is a block that is like the New York Times website or the Huffington Post blog site. Those are national news organizations, and so they post about everything. And so we do allow one block to cover all possible topics. We use a mixed membership stochastic block model to control how likely members of the same block are to post to each other and link, and how likely they are to post to people in different blocks. The basic idea in a stochastic block model is that people within the same block or blog sites within the same block communicate a lot with each other. And if you're in different blocks, then you're less likely to communicate with each other. So that's the statistical model that underlies the situation. To go a little bit further, we have a logistic regression model that controls the probability that one blogger links to another. So if you're in the same block, then you're more likely to link to each other. But there are additional covariates that will control how likely you are to talk to each other. Are you talking about the same topic? Are you both talking about a specific Supreme Court decision? That's going to increase the probability that you link to each other. If you're talking about different Supreme Court decisions, then you're less likely to link to a blog. If you've ever linked to this blogger before, then that increases the probability that you're going to link again. If you're linking to a high-profile blogger, somebody who has a lot of weight and stature in the blogosphere, then that's going to increase the probability that you will link your blog to theirs. There are some people who have a high base rate of linkage and other people who have a low base rate of linkage. So if you're a blog site that tends to link to lots of other blog sites, then you have a higher rate of linking your post to somebody else's post. And finally, there's excitation. If there's a hot topic, then people are more likely to post about it and they're more likely to link to each other about it. And these weights mostly derive from a random effects model for various technical reasons. The excitation process refers to whether or not the topic is hot. So a topic is prominent, and then over time, people grow bored of it and they stop posting about it. And we're using something called a Hawkes process to describe the die-off in interest over time. So let me get a little bit specific. We're using Markov chain Monte Carlo to reverse engineer the generative model and make inferences. And I'm going to look first at the Trayvon Martin corpus. Of the 114,611 blog posts that we scraped, 1,103 were from just 145 blog sites that mentioned the keyword Trayvon one or more times. And that was our initial corpus for analysis. And we linked with posts made by any of the other 145 domains. So probably international people don't know this, but Trayvon Martin was an unarmed 17-year-old African-American who was shot by George Zimmerman in a gated community in Sanford, Florida. Zimmerman was the neighborhood watch commander for the community. He thought that Martin was acting suspiciously. He reported him to the police. The police replied to Zimmerman and told him not to approach the suspect, but Zimmerman ignored them. Zimmerman did approach Trayvon Martin. He claims that Martin attacked him and that Zimmerman used his gun in self-defense to fatally shoot Trayvon Martin. And initially, George Zimmerman was not charged with any crime. Sentiment analysis is an aspect of mining text networks, and it involves trying to determine whether a document has a positive, negative, or neutral tone. And this can be tricky. Human beings use irony and sarcasm in speech and writing, and human beings identify irony and sarcasm correctly only about 80% of the time. So it's easy to misread the intent of a blog post. There's something called an AFIN score. It's a score of 2,477 English words that are rated from -5 to +5 in terms of whether or not they have a positive or a negative connotation. A +5 word would be angelic, brilliant, beatific, holy. Those are all positive words. A -5 word would be murderous, villainous, unholy, merciless. Those are all words that have a negative connotation. And so for our blog posts that mentioned the word Trayvon Martin, we assigned a score to the blog post about how positive or how negative that blog post was. And so we scaled it so that the polarity of a document lay between -1 and +1. And we looked for the blog post that had a polarity whose polarity was greater than 0.2. So that was a very positive document. And we compared that to the documents that had a negative polarity, those whose polarity score was less than -0.2. And when we did that, we tried to find the statistically significant differences between the documents that had high positive polarity and those documents that had large negative polarity. So if you were writing a document, a blog post that used negative sentiments, then the words that were statistically significantly differently used was George Zimmerman. People hated George Zimmerman. People thought he was prejudiced. People thought he was racist. People thought he was a murderer. And so George Zimmerman was the most significantly differently used word in the negative documents. If you look at the positive toned blog posts, it's a little less clear, but I read a number of those posts, and what's going on is something like, this national tragedy is an opportunity for President Obama to show leadership on the problem of racism in the United States. It would say things like, this is a time for Florida to revoke the stand your ground law that people thought George Zimmerman was going to use. It was an opportunity for the United States to have a meaningful dialogue about racism. Those were the types of sentiments that the positive toned documents had. Then we used Dirichlet allocation, which discovered there were 5 topics in the blog posts that mentioned Trayvon Martin. And to characterize those topics, we used the Ngram tokens that loaded most heavily on each of the topics. Topic 1 had a lot of weight on these words. And an international audience is probably not familiar with this, but all these words pertain to the trial of George Zimmerman in the court. It contains the name of the judge. It contains the name of the prosecutor. It contains the name of the forensic audiologist who tried to interpret the audio from the cell phone that Trayvon Martin was using to talk to his girlfriend at the time that he was shot. There's PayPal that appears here because George Zimmerman raised his bail money by appealing through PayPal to people who supported him. And basically a whole batch of racists raised money through PayPal to support the bail of George Zimmerman. When the judge found out that his money had been raised in this way, the judge revoked the bail. Topic 2 is basically a discussion of how Trayvon Martin's shooting was going to impact the presidential election in the United States. And so you see a whole lot of words that have to do with the presidential election. Topic 3 is blog speak. Bloggers like people to discuss their ideas. And so you have words like comment, think, what do you know, point. People are trying to discuss, to encourage discussion of their blog. Topic 4, I'm going to name that as the events of the night. Most bloggers had some summary of what went on when George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin. It involved police, law, gun, self-defense, things that summarize the shooting. Topic 5 is the topic I like best. It's obviously about racism. It has black and white. It has hoodie, which is a conventional garment for young African-American males. We have Fox News. Fox News is all about racism. We have Al Sharpton appearing here. Al Sharpton is a influential black political figure who takes on racism issues, and he, of course, was heavily vocal in the shooting of Trayvon Martin. So right now we're interpreting these topics impressionistically. We've come up with a slightly more principled way to do that, but I'm not going to get into that. I think I have already discussed the issues here. Because I am not familiar with this particular platform for communicating remotely, I'm not going to show you the movie that I have made of the discussion over time of the Trayvon Martin shooting. But I have a nice movie, and you can see things, how the discussion evolves over time. One particular thing that you would see in that movie is that some event occurs, like President Obama gives a speech describing his response to Trayvon Martin shooting. And he said something like, if I had a son, he would look a lot like Trayvon. And that set off a whole riot of discussion in the blogosphere, especially among the conservative bloggers who responded very negatively to President Obama's comments about Trayvon Martin. So we began by focusing just on Trayvon Martin for a number of reasons. One was that it was a small and manageable subset of the database. Another is that the keyword Trayvon was a unique identifier, so we could easily separate the blogs that discussed Trayvon Martin's shooting from blogs that discussed Supreme Court rulings or the presidential campaign or other types of crime. So here's an example of a typical text. There's the blog from the Heritage Group on September 28th of 2012. It says, recent news about the Obama administration divestitures from AIG and GM, in some cases a loss of billions of dollars, stands as a reminder of the privilege and cronyism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when we went through and did the tokenizing of the scraped text, we wound up with a small number of words that we kept. And as you can see, these words have been truncated because that's part of the tokenization process. Administration, they all get lumped to the same token. And there's software called Snowball that does that in a very nice way. We applied latent display allocation to the set of retained tokens, but we allowed the topics to evolve over time. And in particular, we wanted to allow new words such as Benghazi to suddenly appear with high probability. That's part of the dynamic modeling. With the entire blog posts from 2012, we need to determine how many topics there were. And this is not a well-posed question because you can find topic structure at different resolutions. When we keyed in on Trayvon Martin, we were able to find 5 interpretable topics, one related to the trial of George Zimmerman, one related to the presidential election, one related to blog speak, and so forth. And those made sense. But at a higher level, we don't want to looking at that level of granularity for all the blog posts from 2012. And so we need to find a way to determine how many topics we want to look at. And adding topics is always going to improve the likelihood. So we need to put a penalty on the likelihood. And so we're going to penalize the log likelihood function according to the formula that's shown there. And it turns out that there's a large jump here from 10 to 15. And consequently, 10 to 16. And so we decided that we were going to fit 16 topics in the latent Dirichlet allocation. And here is the evolution over time of the weight on the words in topic 10. And so topic 10 at the beginning of the year in February has a lot of weight on police, officers, kill, crime, arrest, year, death, etc. And then as we move into April, we see that there's a lot of weight now on Zimmerman, a lot of weight on Martin. And that's because George Zimmerman shot Trayvon Martin in the previous month, and now the blog posts are all discussing Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. So we're going to name topic 10, sensational crime. This one surprised me. In June, there was a lot of weight on Kimberlin. It turns out that there's a man named Kimberlin who is a former convict who is now advocating for better paths to reintegrate ex-criminals back into society. Conservative bloggers really disliked him. And so there was a day in June when they had a special event to blog about Kimberlin. And the latent Dirichlet allocation discovered this. And it was a real thing. I didn't know about it. And so I feel this as a confirmatory situation. As you move through into November, we see children. And there was a famous school shooting that took place in December in which a lot of children were shot. And this appears too early. And that's actually an indication of one of the weaknesses in our model. We need to be able to put a lot of weight on children in December. And the only way our model can do that is to allow children to have increasing weight in November. And so that's what the reason that the children are appearing here. So it's pretty clear that topic 10 is about crime. It would be nice to have a way to more automatically identify that topic. And so my graduate student played around with Wikipedia articles, trying to find Wikipedia articles whose word distributions matched those of the blog posts that corresponded to sensational crime. And so he wound up getting a partially valid situation. It correctly picks up the Trayvon Martin shooting. It correctly picks up the Sandy Hook shootings, which were where the children were killed. Gun politics in the United States arise. The Duke University lacrosse case is there for a odd reason. Years ago, there was a scandal at Duke University in which lacrosse players were accused of rape. It was much earlier than 2012, but what happened was a group of football players in Nebraska were also accused of rape in 2012, and blog posters said it was like the Duke lacrosse incident. So here was an early attempt to try and automatically name the topics. Here's a more interesting graphic. It shows how much attention is given to the topic 10 over time. And in March and April, there's a lot of weight on Trayvon Martin, or there's a lot of weight in sensational crime, and that was right around the time that Trayvon Martin was shot and the active discussion. Here, there's a lot of discussion about the Sandy Hook shootings. And so we're able to correctly identify how salient or how visible the sensational crime is in the public thinking of the bloggers. I'm getting close to the end of time, but here is topic 7. It's clearly about the United States presidential election in 2012. At the beginning of the year, there's a lot of weight on Romney, another candidate named Rick Santorum, Obama, Newt Gingrich, and so forth. But as the campaign moves forward, Santorum drops out, Gingrich drops out, and their names are no longer being discussed. And so you can see that it gets down to the election month in November. You have Obama and Romney being high-profile words, Democrat and Republican being high-profile words, and that's where things stand. We repeated the attempt to try and automatically name topic 7. It's sort of hit or miss. Some things it gets right, some things it gets wrong. I love this diagram. There's a lot of discussion early on about who the candidates for president are. It gets boring for the middle of the year. In summer, it begins to get more intense as the election date gets closer and closer. And the day after the election, there's virtually no discussion. There's no reason for bloggers to discuss after the fact. So a lot of speculation on who's going to win the election going up to November. But as soon as the election is over, the interest drops dramatically. So let me see if I can draw some conclusions from this. There are many possible models, and the one that we've developed allows a plausible inference about how the dynamics of text networks evolve over time. Community detection, which concerns the stochastic block structure, is of critical interest to identifying echo chambers of participants that are all focused on similar topics, and some of those topics are relevant to national security. Sentiment analysis is important to identify how people are feeling. You can easily distinguish the Republican bloggers from the Democrat bloggers from the independent bloggers based on sentiment analysis. And sentiment analysis is much more complex than what I've talked about here. You can do positive and negative sentiment, but you can also do erudite to informal, which is a different type of thing. You can use temperature. Is it a red meat blog post, or is it an analytical cold sentiment? So there are a lot of axes in sentiment analysis that we did not discuss, but something that one could take account of. In many applications, one needs to be able to scale this and do it quickly. And so we would like to be able to have the capacity to handle streaming data. And for modern applications, Word2Vec is the right way to handle code words and disguised discussion. You certainly see, for example, in Chinese posts, they have various evasions that can disguise what they're talking about, so that their posts are not automatically censored. So those are the points I wanted to make, and I think I'm right at time. Let me stop and ask if there are questions.
David, thank you very much for your very nice talk, as always. We have some time for questions, either from online. We have around 50 people on YouTube, or from the room here. Is there any question for David? While people think, I have a question myself.
Okay.
While you were talking, I was here thinking, well, what if we put all this corpus together and we input it to a large language model? What will the result be? Did you try to do something like that, like in terms of comparison, or which topics will be coming out? Have you thought about that, or have you tried to do that?
I've not tried to do that. One issue is the fact that we have a very large corpus, and trying to send that to a large language model is more adventurous than I have ever been with one of them. I'd also have to figure out what the correct prompt is. So I might ask it to identify the 16 most distinct topics within this corpus. And I'd probably have to try and give it some information about what we mean by distinct. For example, I could imagine that a large language model might decide that posts in January are distinct from posts in December. And that's true, but that's an aspect of distinctness that I don't want the large language model to think about. Instead, I want it to think about politics, legal decisions, sensational crime, international incidents, the Arab Spring. So, Paulo, that's a lovely question. I will see if I can get a graduate student to check it out.
Thank you very much. I have here another question on YouTube from Guilherme Pumi. Mm-hmm. Is saying, at some point, OCS process is used to model self-exciting in the topics. How did you choose the kernel, the intensity, to be used in the particular model?
A good question. This is years ago. I have to go back and look at my paper to try and identify what the kernel for the Hawks process was. Probably some sort of cross-validation, but I'd have to go back and check.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it for questions. Is there anything from the audience here? No, so let's thank David for his very nice talk. Thank you very much. We are right on time, so we are moving to the second talk without a break. The second speaker is Weijie Su. Weijie Su is an associate professor in the Wharton Statistics and Data Science Department, and by courtesy in the Department of Computer and Information Science at the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. He serves as co-director of the Penn Research in Machine Learning Center. Prior to joining Penn, he earned a PhD in statistics from Stanford in 2016 and his bachelor's degree in mathematics from the Peking University in 2011. His research interests include statistical foundations of generative AI, privacy-preserving data analysis, high-dimensional statistics, and optimization. He serves as an associate editor of the Journal of Machine Learning Research, Journal of the American Statistical Association, Foundations and Trends in Statistics, and Operations Research. He is currently a guest editor of a special issue on statistics for large language models and large language models for statistics in the journal Stat is a journal of the International Statistical Institute. His work has been recognized with several awards and honors, such as the Stanford Anderson Distinction Award, NSF Career Award, Sloan Research Fellowship, IMS Peter Hall Prize, CM Early Career Prize in Data Science, ASA Noether Early Career Award, the ICBS Frontiers of Science Award in Mathematics, and he also has 2 discussion papers in the Journal of Royal Statistical Society, Series B, and the Journal of the American Statistical Association. He's a fellow of the IMS. So, Weijie, it is a great pleasure for us to have you here with us. I want to thank you again for your availability. And Weijie is going to talk about large language models and whether they need or not statistical foundations. Weijie, thank you very much again, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank Paulo for the invitation. Thanks for the very warm introduction. Yeah, now let me first share my screen. So can you see my?
It's not yet here.
Entire window. Looks like I need to adjust it. Hopefully.
So.
Oh, looks like. Excuse me. I need to quit and log in again. I will be back.
Okay, that's okay. So let's wait a couple of minutes.
Hello, is it working?
Yes, we have it here. Yes, we have your camera, we have your full screen, so please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, so I have not visited Brazil, but I really wish to visit someday. I'm a fan of soccer or football. I would prefer to call soccer. To prefer to call football rather than soccer. And hopefully one day I hope have the opportunity to visit the beautiful country, Brazil. So today I'm going to talk about some of my research focusing on large language models, but from a statistical perspective. So this is the beginning story of large language models. So imagine that there is a very intelligent octopus living under the seabed, and the octopus have access to the fibers optics, and so they basically can listening to humans' conversations on one side and the other side. And so the question is that, can the octopus understand human language, human knowledge after many years of listening to humans' conversations? So this is essentially the original idea of next token prediction. So it's just based on the previous text and to predict the next token or next word. So this idea was first proposed by Ilya Sutskever back to 2018. When he proposed this idea, actually most people in the community thought that this idea would not work. This idea was too simple, too easy. That does not sound to be something that will be effective. But however, now we can say that this idea actually is working. It's working. It's really working, because we have not only ChatGPT, we have other language models, including Claude, Gemini, DeepSeek. So essentially now it's a competition among many different AI companies to develop the most advanced language models. And now, what's the most popular programming language? It's neither Python or R. Actually, this is English. English becomes the hottest programming language. we can just use language to ask any LLM to write the code for us, okay? Either in Python or R. And it pass these language models now can pass the Turing test at a certain level. It's really amazing. Okay? And it's an impact on economy. It has also started. Okay? So this is an article saying that actually language models actually can be used to boost the productivity in many industry sectors. So this is an arms race, and so I have to update the numbers. When GPT-3 came out, it has 175 billion parameters, but now DeepSeek has 600 billion parameters, and perhaps Llama 4 has an even larger number of parameters. So this is a really arms race. But I'm a statistician. My training is in statistics. So when I first saw that ChatGPT came out, I was wondering that what's the relation between AI and the statistics, and how we statisticians should react to this big machine, this AI. And so this is the first reaction. So this is a fun cartoon with statisticians often make fun of AI. So the idea of this cartoon is that AI essentially, or machine learning, is just statistics with a little bit decoration. Okay, so this is one view. But there's another view. This view is a little bit pessimistic. It's basically saying that AI is really something will change our life. Will basically replace us. Will replace us in the future. It's really a little bit pessimistic, right? But this is not only among statisticians. It's a general sentiment among many people in other communities, like in physics, in chemistry, because last year Nobel Prizes went to in physics and chemistry went to AI. Okay, but in this lecture, we hope to convey that there could be something between. It's neither that's optimistic or pessimistic. It's something between. I hope to argue that for that. So first of all, let's zoom in. Let's examine what's the relationship between AI and statistics. First of all, the impact of AI on statistics is quite clear, right? Because now we have language models. Most language models can analyze data for us. Okay? We can just upload the data and ask what questions we want to examine, and the LLM can automatically do the analysis for us. It's especially good at data visualization because we know that most visualization packages are not easy to. It's very complex, right? There are many packages to do different visualization, but the LLM, as long as you want to describe what's the effect you want to have in your visualization, it can do it. But in this lecture, we want to do the opposite. We want to ask what statistics can offer to AI to make AI better or slightly better. So this is what we want to focus. So first of all, of course, we need to ask this fundamental question, a little bit philosophical. Do LLMs really need statistics? Okay, and from this fundamental level, we will say that yes. But this is essentially so this is an article by Richard Stratton, who got the Turing Award early this year. So he wrote a very influential article called "The Bit Lesson." So his bit lesson basically argues that statistics and competition basically are the main factor in advancing AI. Okay? It's not the hard-coded human knowledge into AI that makes AI better. Actually, it's just statistics and the competition, because statistics and competition is the way to let the data speak for themselves. Okay? Let the data speak for themselves and make the system larger. And then you will see a better machine, better AI machine. And Ian Lacan, another Turing laureate, said that statistical LLMs are autoregressive. Okay, that's by definition. And autoregressive, by definition, is statistical, right? So in this sense, LLMs are statistical models. But of course, this is a little bit too broad, too vague, because in the language of Richard Stratton, statistics is a little bit broad, maybe broader than what we traditional statisticians would be thinking of. So here, let's focus a little bit. Let's zoom in. Let's narrow our scope a bit. Let's focus on the statistic in the sense of the data modeling culture by Leo Bremen, or the attribution statistical inference by Brad Efron. And even by narrowing down our scope, I would argue that statistics is still necessary for AI, for language models. Why? Because ChatGPT essentially is a machine to turn text into data, okay, into data numbers, and it's stochastic by design. And so this is a long history, starting from N-gram, introduced by Professor David Banks in his early lectures. Okay? So, and the moreover, transformer in LLMs actually is a black box. It has lots of building blocks like multi-head attention, like normalization, so many building blocks are making the system almost impossible to understand from a mechanistic perspective, almost impossible. It's more like a biology. So LLMs resemble more like a biological system rather than a physical system, in my personal experience. So, and also the system becomes larger and larger ever since GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3. Okay, and so the gap between theory and practice is become larger and larger. So in this case, mechanistic mathematics usually has very little can offer for black box systems. But instead, statistics actually will become more powerful because statistics has a long history of predicting something, modeling the relationship between variables, even without understanding their underlying mechanism. So this is where statistics can do a good job. This is many examples have proven this, especially in biology. So there are many topics in statistics where topics in LLMs where statistical efforts, statistical insights can make a difference. And so in this lecture, we will focus on 3 of them: watermark, alignment, and evaluation. Okay. So what is watermark? Watermark is basically to make sure that we can detect text, AI-generated text from human-written text. Okay. We want to distinguish between these 2 different types of text. And the second, what is alignment? Alignment is basically to make LLM more trustworthy, make LLM do as following our human's intentions. Okay, so we want to make sure that LLMs will match our human preferences as much as possible. And the third, we want to evaluate how good an LLM is. Okay, in terms how good it is at math, at coding, and at language. Okay, so this is evaluation. Evaluation is important to make LLM development standardized. Okay. So this is the first piece of work on LLMs. LLM watermarks is based on joint work with many collaborators, especially SaLLy. So he's my postdoc. He's the lead author of all of these 2 papers. So everyone at university, either a professor or student, now may have the feeling that now students are doing better and better in their homework assignment. Okay? And I've been teaching the same course for my department for like 4 years, the same course. So I noticed that the students are doing better and better in their homework, so they all get perfect score. But meanwhile, I rely on like in-class quiz. When we do in-class quiz, we have to close the laptop, right? You cannot not do it. So I noticed that actually they actually do worse than their previous counterparts. Looks like actually some people are doing, right? Some people are using LLMs to help they do homework. Actually, this is an empirical study showing that there's a significant fraction of peer reviews in machine learning actually were motivated or even written by LLMs. So this is an embarrassing story, and so this is a paper published on a decent journal, a published version, a free version, and so So here, maybe can you see the line highlight in yellow? And if you cannot see, let me zoom in for you. So the first sentence reads, certainly here is a possible introduction for your topic. Okay, so this is certainly something will appear when you ask a language model to write or polish something for you. Okay, and the embarrassing story is that neither the author, the reviewer, the editor, and even the publisher didn't notice this thing. They didn't delete this line. Okay, so it looks like there's a real need to make sure that we can easily detect AI-generated text from human-written text. Okay, it's important for education and maintain academic integrity. And this is also important to maintain the quality, preserve the quality of data for training the next generation AI models. So last year, there was a paper published in Nature showing that if we train our model on data that were produced by another AI model, okay, we train our AI model on synthetic data only. And if we repeat this for multiple times, and then the AI model's performance will decline. So people call this phenomenon model collapse. So model collapse has been studied by many people. It's a hot topic, like David Donahoe, very influential statistician, and has also been working on this. And this is also important for biosecurity. Okay, and we also want to detect that some proteins actually were generated by AI models rather than real protein in the nature. Okay, so there are lots of work already to detect AI-generated text, but mostly it's based on linguistic patterns. But in the long run, this method will not be reliable. Why? Because in the long run, AI in principle can generate any style, okay, any style of language text. They can just mimic our style, and in the long run, they will resemble human-written text more and more. Okay, so it looks like it's impossible, right? It looks like it's impossible to distinguish between AI-generated text and from human-written ones. In the long run, it looks like our whole internet will be full of text written generated by AI. But the good hope is that actually there is a principled approach called watermarking, LLMs, and this was introduced by a group of computer scientists from University of Maryland. So the idea is very simple, elegant, and it's based on the idea that LLMs are probabilistic, and so we can control how they generate text. And basically, we can use pseudorandom to generate text, and based on the pseudorandomness, a correlation between the pseudorandom variables and the observed text, and we can construct some test statistic. Okay, if there's such a dependence, and then this must be AI generated. Otherwise, this is a human written. Okay. So far so good. And so since 2 years ago, and so now there is becomes a very hot research area of watermarking research. And every few weeks, there will be a new watermarking scheme developed by computer scientists. So there's an AI executive order, and so these tech giants and like Google, OpenAI, Meta have pledged to watermark their AI content in the next few years. Okay, so far everything has done mostly it's in computer science. So from a statistical perspective, we are asking what we can do to make it watermarking more statistical. Okay, more statistical, more guarantees. Okay, so first of all, we need to distinguish between the two different types of error: false positive and the false negative. False positive error is the error where we mistakenly detect human-written text as AI generated. Okay, in reality, it's written by me, it's written by person, but we mistakenly classify this as AI generated. And the false negative is the opposite. Okay, and so we want to compare different watermarking schemes, and by fix the type 1 error. Okay, and now let's compare the type 2 error. Once the type 1 error is controlled, we want to make the type 2 error as small as possible, right? And essentially, we want to find more powerful detection rule. And we also want to make it more robust against premium edit. Okay, before introducing all the technical details, we have to first introduce tokenization, the concept of tokenization. So tokenization is a process to break down text into small units called tokens. Okay, so a token in general can be a word. Mostly it's a case of a word, but sometimes this can be, for example, a subword. For example, in this case, in this example, OpenAI. OpenAI actually has two tokens, Open and AI. But in this talk, we basically lecture, we can just think token as a word. It does not does not affect understanding. Okay? So most language models have a very large token vocabularies. For example, for GPT family, it has 50,000, and for DeepSeek, it has 128,000 tokens, very large. Okay, so each time when we want to, for each next token prediction, we have a very long vector, PT. So PT is the multinomial probability distribution. Has the dimension is K, and each entry is a probability, and all these probabilities sum up to 1. Okay? So we sample from a token following this multinomial distribution, okay, and this is our next token prediction, okay. And here we assume that PT in application, we do not have access to PT because next token prediction actually depends on many things like system prompts. We don't know, okay, we don't know. So here is an example, and so we have generated 6 tokens. We want to generate next token, the seventh token, and we can, for example, in this case, we select carpet with probability 13%. Okay, so now let's consider the case in the presence of watermarking. When there's watermarking, now we have to use pseudo-randomness to replace the true random sampling. Okay, what we do is to use a decoder S. Okay, S decoder is. And the decoder is a function of the previous, it's the multinomial distribution, P7, and the pseudo-random variable, C7. So basically what we want to achieve is that although the pseudo-random variable is pseudo, right? But what we know in like Monte Carlo simulation, we often set a seed, okay? And then we generate millions of IID uniform random variables, right? You know that they're all deterministic, okay, because the seed has been set. But if you plot a histogram of all these pseudo-random variables, they just look like the original random variables. Okay? So the idea that C7 is although it's pseudo-random, but in effect it looks like truly random. Okay, does not, statistically speaking, does not violate any like assumption. We can just treat this as a random. And so we hope that the token W7 will just follow the original multinomial distribution, P7. Okay? And in practice, the pseudo-random variable, C7, will be given by a hash function. The hash function will be determined by previous tokens and a private key. And the private key will only be passed from OpenAI to, for example, to a trusted protocol to the professor. And the student will not have access to the private key. Okay. So basically, every watermarking scheme corresponds to a way to sample from a multinomial distribution. And so now, what's the most classical sampling scheme from multinomial distribution? So this could be the Gumbel max trick, right? And you generate IID copies of uniform distribution, take log divided by p, okay, and maximize. You want to maximize the index. So this will follow the multinomial distribution. So Scott Everson's Gumbel max watermark actually is just following this idea. So Scott Everson was visiting a computer scientist visiting OpenAI 2 years ago. So he proposed this watermarking scheme. So he chose the token which maximizes the fraction of log u divided by p. So what's the idea that this could be detected? Although we don't know p, okay, p is unknown, but if we want to maximize the fraction, right, log of u divided by p, if we want to maximize the fraction, and then in general, the numerator will also be stochastic larger. Okay, so if there's uniform distribution, uniform random variables as a histogram looks stochastic larger than uniform, okay, then it's evidence that this might be AI generated. Okay? So this scheme has been internally implemented at OpenAI. So last year there was a Wall Street Journal article showing that actually there's a debate internally at OpenAI about when they should release it. Okay, the technique has been developed. It's just a matter of when they will release it. So another watermark scheme by Google was published at Nature last year. Okay, so this is the human written versus LLM generated comparison. So here we basically formulate this as a hypothesis testing. Under the null, this is written by human, okay, written by human. Under alternative, this is written by LLM, generated by LLM, okay. And the data we can leverage is basically the pseudo-random variables and the observed tokens, the text. And the P here, the multinomial distributions here are unknown. So this is essentially hypothesis testing, right? And for hypothesis testing, from step 1.1, we will start with the name and Pearson lemma using the likelihood ratio test. So the likelihood ratio here looks like simple, right? It's simple enough. But however, in order to distinguish between the two possibilities, we need to know P. We need to know the multinomial distributions, but we don't know. So here the multinomial distributions are essentially nuisance parameters. We don't know, so we cannot use it. We cannot use the Neyman Pearson lemma directly. So we have to resort to a compromise. Our compromise is to use the pivotal statistic. So the pivotal statistic is a function of the current token WT and the pseudo-random variable T. So we require that this statistic will follow a distribution, fixed distribution mu naught, independent of PT, independent of the multinomial distribution. Okay, independent. So this is a compromise. Why? Because now we basically reduce some information. Okay, we discard certain information from the token and the pseudo-random variable, but in return we have the pivotal property. The pivotal property basically allows us to use a sum-based statistic. Our statistic is the sum of, in the form of age of the pivotal statistic, summed from the first token to the last token. Okay, so basically we aggregate all the signals into a statistic. Since due to their pivotal property, so the distribution of this statistic is known under null. Okay, when this is written by me, by human, we know the distribution. So if the statistic turns out to be too large or too small, okay, then we can safely reject it. Okay, so now I basically omit all the technical details and present you this result. So under certain assumptions, we can prove that the type 2 error will decay exponentially, and the rate here is being given by this minimization form. And inside it, phi here is the worst case likelihood ratio. It's the worst case moment generating function. Okay? And here again, we haven't. This applies to any score function h. And finally, we want to find the best possible score function h, right? So this becomes a minimax game, and the nature will choose the worst likelihood, the worst case multinomial distribution. But I will choose the best score function. Okay, this is not convex concave, but analytically we are lucky. We can solve it completely for the gamma max watermark. So this is the best possible score function, and it's a little bit complex. But here, delta is a tuning parameter, which is essentially the temperature, measures the temperature, and usually it's said to be like 0.1 or 0.01. Okay. In comparison, Scott Aaronson and some group of computer scientists, some people in Stanford computer science proposed other score functions. So their score functions are also very intuitive. Why? Because under null, why the pivotal statistic will follow uniform distribution, right? Uniform distribution. And then log of uniform distribution is what? Is exponential distribution. minus exponential distribution. So if you add up all the signals, and then the null distribution of this statistic will be gamma distribution. Okay, so that's the statistical idea. But analytically, actually, our score function is uniformly more powerful than the other score functions. So our score function has a rate uniformly higher than the other score functions for any parameter data. Okay, it's in red. Our curve is above them. The higher the score function is, the faster the convergence rate of the type 2 error. And we can also compare empirically. And all the score functions can control the type 2 error, no problem. But now when it comes to type 2 error, and our score function has the uniformly lowest type 2 error, meaning we have the highest power. Okay, so next, and now let's move on to the second part. Okay, and this is alignment. So this is joint work with again many people, but the lead author is Jiancheng Xiao. Jiancheng did the majority of the work, so he's my postdoc. And so this is a very famous inferential diagram from OpenAI's InstructGPT paper like 2 or 3 years ago. So this is basically reinforced learning from human feedback. It's basically an important phase after pre-training. After pre-training, we needed to basically teach language model how to speak, how to interact with us, right? And so let's first examine the third step. The third step is basically to fine-tune the language model using reinforced learning to let language model produce a response with high reward, with good quality. So essentially that we have a good teacher already, and we want to pass the knowledge from teacher to the student. The student here is a pre-trained language model. So here the preference can be modeled by the Bradley Terry Luce model, BTR model. So basically we use this simple exponential function to model the comparison between apple and orange. Okay, and if we want to ensure that 70% of the people prefer apple versus orange, and then we only need to require that the difference between the two rewards is 0.847. Okay, so here mathematically we want to maximize the expected reward R. R is the reward of X. X is a prompt, Y is a response. And the response will follow a policy distribution, which is parameterized by the parameters phi of the weights of the LLM. And it's conditional probability, conditional on X, conditional on the question you ask. So an empirical study shows that actually after this fine-tuning, actually the majority will get amplified. What does this mean? This means that in the training data, in the reward model, suppose maybe only 51% of the people prefer orange, 51%. But after this reinforced learning, and the LM would prefer apple with probability maybe 60%, 70%, 80%, larger or much larger than 51% originally. So this means that actually there's a tyranny of the majority. Okay, tyranny of the majority. And the idea is the code is very simple to understand. Suppose that there are only two possibilities, right? Apple and orange, and the apple has slightly higher reward because it's 51% versus 49%. But if we want to really maximize the reward, and we will put our 100% weight only on apple, okay? Only bet on apple completely. And then in this way, we would maximize our reward, expected reward. But the outcome is not good because the consequence is that now the minority will go away, okay? The minority will not be heard. But however, our human preferences are very diverse, right? Because even from the human OpenAI's InstructGPT paper, about 1/3 of the time, even these professional human laborers didn't agree with each other. And moreover, in general, we depends on our human choices, depends on our background, ethnic background, education background, and many genders. We have different preferences, right? Sometimes it's between coffee and tea, football and basketball, right? Different people will have different answers. So this is essentially, when I first saw this, I thought this must be opportunities for statisticians. But of course, OpenAI has all the smart people. They realize this issue in addition to other similar issues, but they call it over-optimization. I attended John Schulman's talk. John Schulman was a co-founder of OpenAI. I attended his talk in person 2 years ago in Hawaii. So seems to me, but the answer offered by them is to basically to early stop. Okay, don't train the model for too long. But to me, it's a little bit ad hoc because the bias is still there, right? If you stop in the middle, of course, you can maybe reduce the bias by half, but it's not 100%. So here we want to completely solve it. So here what we do is to use a regularization. We want to regularize the reward. The regularization is a function of the policy distribution of the response, okay, pi. And we want to determine R. We want to find R, the form of the regularizer, such that the maximizer of this regularized reward will follow the original BTR model. This means that we will just have the same distribution with the original reward model, at least for the training data. Okay. And now I skip all the theorems, the proofs, and our theorem is that, yes, we can find such regularizar, and we can also, this is not only sufficient, it's also necessary. The regularizar which satisfies this preference matching takes this form, log 1 of pi and plus 2 terms which result from integration by part. So let me explain. So this term actually is basically the entropy term. Okay. Now we want to maximize the reward. Maximizing reward only will be a little bit narrow-minded. But maximizing entropy will have the opposite effect because entropy maximization will encourage diversity, will encourage more exploration. So luckily, these 2 terms were struck at the right balance at the BTL model. So the pipeline we suggest, in addition to pre-training and the IIHF, finally we hope that there's one last step we can do is to use preference matching. So we did some experiments, and we are all a group of statisticians with not much computer science background. So we have to learn from scratch how to do fine-tuning for language models. First, we did a small experiment on OPT1B. And on the left, the bars here denotes the divergence between the LLM and the reward model. The smaller the better. The smaller the divergence is, means that the LLM has the similar preference with the reward. So basically, alpha here is the tuning parameter in our method. So we can reduce the divergence of the original method by 20%. And now we use a larger model, Llama 7B. So we basically can reduce the divergence by 30%. Okay, so Llama 7B is the largest model we can fine-tune, and we hope our belief is that if we are allowed to run a larger experiment, we can further reduce the divergence. Okay, so here we have examined the third step, and now let's examine the second step about the reward model. How can we train a good reward model? Again, so this is a preference matching using preference learning by a reward model. But reward model here has a defining property, which is the transitivity. Transitivity means that if the majority prefer A over B, and the majority prefer B over C, and then the majority will prefer A over C. It's transitive. But however, the French mathematician and politician and philosopher Condorcet, and in 200 years ago, observed this phenomenon, the Condorcet paradox, that human preferences in general are not transitive. Okay, unfortunately. So for example, here, this is an example. 2/3 of Alice, Bob, and Charlie prefer A over B, and 2/3 prefer B over C, and 2/3 prefer C over A. So it becomes a cycle. Oh, okay, A dominates B, B dominates C, C dominates A. Okay, so basically we can prove that human preference can be represented by a reward model if and only if there's no such cycles. And we can further prove that under certain mild probability assumptions, probabilistic assumptions, and the existence of these cycles actually is exponentially large, exponentially close to 1. So this means that in practice, there must be cycles, essentially. And so in principle, or statistically or mathematically speaking, there must be something missing if we use a reward model to represent human preferences. Actually, this bound actually solves a open problem in social choice theory. We didn't know. We first proved our theorem, and then we searched the literature. We found that this is a similar problem proposed by people in social choice theory many years ago. Okay, so later we proposed another approach called we studied another approach introduced by people from Google. They call it Nash learning from human feedback. The idea is basically to let two language models to compete, pi and pi prime. Hopefully, each one want to win over the other. However, we need to prevent collapse, okay? Meaning that we do not want to end up in a Nash equilibrium where each language model's best strategy is only to produce one response. If so, there's no diversity, right? And we find that in order to prevent such collapse, and the necessary and the sufficient assumption is that there's no Condorcet winning response. No Condorcet winning response is that there's no response that is preferred by the majority over any other responses. And the good thing that this probability actually decays very small, multinomially. It's basically n to the power of this number. It's basically n to the power -1. Okay, -1. So it's very small. So this means that in practice, Nash learning from human feedback actually will be producing a strategy with multiple responses. And we have run some experiment on some small 1B model, and so our method will beat the other models in most of the time. Okay. So this is the reality. So in general, there must be cycles. So we have to we cannot use reward model to perfectly represent human preferences. And but luckily, in general, there's no Condorcet winning responses. So that's why Nash learning from human feedback will still preserve the diversity. So I think I don't have time. Let me finish this in a couple of minutes. So the last step is evaluation. Okay, so evaluation is basically a statistician's take on evaluation. So this joint work with SaLLy. Again, SaLLy is my postdoc. So evaluation is important because evaluation basically allows us to assess how well the development is. Okay, whether the language model is working well or not. If this is working well, okay, we should reinforce our previous approach to change the model. If this is not working well, we should go back. We should check our method. Okay, so this basically provides a guidance on how to effective training of language models. But however, now there's a crisis of LLM evaluation because basically every model came out will say that actually they achieved the best score on all possible benchmarks. They're the best in math, they're the best in science, they're the best in coding. But however, when you really use the models, actually you will feel different. Actually, it will not be as much as they claim. Okay, so that's inflation of the scores. And Andrei Karpathy is an influential AI researcher. He tweeted that actually he didn't trust all these LLM evaluations anymore. Okay, so this is actually a great story between great minds between statistics and computer science. So Brad Effer and his course had a paper basically to estimate the unseen, to estimate how many words did Shakespeare really know. Okay, of course we can examine all the documents written by Shakespeare, but it's possible that Shakespeare knew more words than he wrote, right? He must know some words. Actually, he didn't have a chance to write out. And this is another story by Turing. Okay, Turing actually developed an estimate to estimate how many species that you haven't observed. So this was used in his machine to crack the enigma in World War II. So here, for example, we want to evaluate how many theorems, rare disease do language model really know. Okay, and so basically we can first examine the outputs of the language model based on outputs we have already seen. But it's possible that language models know more than what we observe. Okay, and now let's predict how many additional language theorems already exist. The language model will know if I ask language model more. Okay, so the red is the estimate, the red line is the estimate, black is the ground truth. And you can compare the difference between the two lines, right? The prediction is very accurate. And based on only the number of observations we have seen, okay, and so this is the ranking between these 4 language models by Meta, Mistral, OpenAI, and 2 models from OpenAI. Okay, but we can examine how many times these language models, these theorems appear according to their frequency, right? And some theorems only appear once, and some theorems appear 2 times, okay, so on and so forth. And the remarkable aspect of the theory by Brian Efron and Turing is that we can, based on the frequency pattern of the theorems, we can predict how many theorems actually appear 0 times. This doesn't mean that these theorems do not exist. They do exist. LLMs just don't have time to list them. Okay, if you ask LLMs more in the future, ultimately these theorems will come out. Okay, so the question for us is to estimate how many theorems appear 0 times. And after adjust the number, and now we will get a completely different ranking. In this case, OpenAI's GPT-4 becomes number 1. Okay? So this means actually we really needed to estimate the unknown capacities of language model, and this is very important. This will alter the ranking very much. So this is concluding part. So there are lots of topics, and we didn't have a chance to mention. But I believe this is a very promising research direction. And as LLMs becoming more and more used in practice in many different domains and directions, and more research directions for the statistics will come out. And most of them are low-hanging fruits, and so very easy to start with and get lots of interesting, exciting things done. So I believe that this is neither the case. We don't need to be that pessimistic, and AI is not going to replace us. And also, I hope that we should also recognize that AI and has some different layers that different than statistics. So that's why we should also work hard to catch up and use our statistical insights to contribute more in this AI wave. So then what's the future? Of course, this is a very important question, especially for young people, right, between AI and the statistics. Personally, I don't know, because nobody can predict what's coming in the next few years, right? Because the world and the AI research is changing so much every day. And every 3 weeks, there will be a breakthrough. But hopefully, this will be the future, I hope. And I think based on my own research, I think there's a good possibility that this could be the reality, because I think statistical ideas are so powerful, and this will make AI better in many ways. And but it's really counting on us, and we statisticians, we need to do it. So this is, I have a position paper with the same title on my lecture and on my website. You can also find it on arXiv. Okay, so this is the reference this presentation is based on. Okay, and thanks for your time. And thank you.
Weijie, thank you very much for the very nice talk. I have here a couple of questions in the chat. Let me give them to you. The first one is by Naomi, and she's saying, thinking on the perspective of information theory, is it safe to say we'll never get all the information needed to completely understand a large language model? Is that the reason to be worried? Can we overcome that?
Great question. It might be related to AI safety. I have paid some attention to this research area, but never had a chance to do research seriously in AI safety or AI interpretation. But I believe that there will, I think, as technology evolve, we will gradually understand more and more about AI models using like mechanistic interpretation. A technical now is being developed by Anthropic. But I guess there will be always a gap. And this is based on my observation that basically we can only understand a model using even more advanced models. Like last year or 2 years ago, OpenAI has an article research using GPT-4 to understand GPT-2, to understand how GPT-2 reason about the prompt. Okay, so basically we can only use a more advanced language model to understand a small model. But for the SOTA, the state-of-art model, basically there's little thing we can do. And so this could lead to safety issue in the long run. But this is a too big problem for me to discuss. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. The second question is by Fernanda, and she's saying, thank you for this great talk. Could such models based on multinomial distribution be used to provide some quantification of between brackets correctness probability?
So basically about watermarking. So watermarking is basically hypothesis testing, and so here essentially we get a kind of p-value. So the p-value here cannot be directly interpreted as the correction as the probability that this is AI written or human written. It basically gives us some evidence on how likely the observation will be if the null is the case. And yeah, so this is So this is
Thank you very much. Is there a question here in the room? Yes. Não. Se você quiser pode falar e eu falo aqui.
O modelo, na verdade, né, ele acaba sempre dando uma resposta para cá, né? E nem sempre ele está tão seguro, né? Ele é capaz de saber que ele sempre dá com certa segurança, mas nem sempre está seguro. Então, a gente poderia usar, no caso, né, ferramental estatístico para conseguir avaliar, no caso, né, para que o modelo desse uma métrica de qual a segurança que ele tem naquele output que ele deu.
The question is from one of the students in my course is about every time that you ask for anything from a large language model, you get a response. What is asking is if there could be some way of giving like a percentage of certainty, like a kind of measure of how certain the model is not hallucinating or something like that.
Oh, that's a great question.
Do you have any idea?
Yeah. So this is I think I also listed in these topics, statistical topics on LLMs. Is uncertainty quantification. So these are super important because LLMs will soon be actually maybe already being used in like high-stake decision makings, like in healthcare here. And so here we need to understand how confident the LLM is in making a diagnostic, right? So yeah, so I think people have already used their like conformal prediction to do it. But a difficulty here, I guess, it's basically conformal prediction often assumes exchangeability. Sometimes with some relaxation, but sometimes we really want to get some like marginal conditional assessment. So this research area seems to me is still is ongoing. It's really still there's lots of things we can do to make it better. And in my position paper, I also briefly discussed this research, all these other research topics other than alignment, watermarking, and evaluation.
Yes, thank you very much. Is there any further question? Yes.
Sobre watermarking, por exemplo, a gente não teria problema para detectar se o texto não fosse totalmente criado por humano ou totalmente criado por máquina, se fosse um texto místico. E outra coisa também para adicionar, a questão, por exemplo, a gente tem alguns tipos de textos que a gente faz que eles têm um formato. Por exemplo, artigos científicos, relatórios. esses tipos de texto que tem um formato, a gente acaba não tendo, eu acho que a gente pode não ter essa independência, mesmo escrevendo de forma humana. Como é que seria para o teste de hipótese detectar esse tipo de coisa, conseguir ouvir?
Yeah, Weijie, the question is about watermarking. Imagine that you have a text that is partially written by human and partially revised by a large language model. Can you have some thought on that? And there is a follow-up on if it is a specific kind, like if it is a research paper or if it is a report or a blog post. So if that could depend on the kind of venue that you are aiming your writing to go.
Oh yeah, so this is a very, very good question. So in practice, we will rewrite the output from LLM. So it's essentially a human and LLM collaboration. And in this case, actually, if you have a certain paper about robust detection of watermarks in the presence of human edit. And so we didn't have too much chance to discuss this paper in this lecture. But the idea is basically to use the sparse detection mixture from statistics to come up a test statistic, which is no longer in the form of additive sum from all the tokens. Essentially, it's using empirical process to scan through a window to find out the most likely location to stop, to find the most largest departure from the null and the alternative. And yeah, so and then in this case, we can also make the detection more robust.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's it for today. Let's thank Weijie for his very nice talk.
Yeah, thank you, Paulo, and thank you all for the questions.
I don't know if Dave is still online.
Yes.
Yes, do you mind to share your camera, please?
I will try to do that.
Yes, so David and Weijie, thank you very much for your time. As I mentioned, this is part of the course on large language models for master and PhD students in statistics and data science. And I would like to give you the chance of saying a few last words, recommendation, or how do you think the direction would go on the research on this field, or advanced and contributions from these kind of models for the world in general and the day-to-day life? If you want to have like 1 minute to conclude, please feel free to do so.
The world is changing swiftly under our feet. The potential is enormous. I wish everybody good luck with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so this is a very timely course, and I think everyone sitting in the class made a great decision to enroll in this course, in Paulo's course. And so AI is a young area, and only most of the breakthroughs were made by young people like you. And I envy you. I hope that I could become younger. And so there are so many opportunities, and I think everybody should be excited about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for coming. I'd like to thank the people that came here physically. I'd like to thank the people online. We had between 45 and 50 people online all the time, so it is a nice number. And thank you, David. Thank you, Weijie. Yes, all the best for you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Paulo.
Thank you.